Rosé after the rainbow. Last week, we reflected on how God brought Noah and his family and the creatures through the flood on the ark. The rainbow is a glorious gift that God described as the symbol of his everlasting covenant with Noah and his family, with all the peoples of the earth and the creatures of the earth, that God will never again destroy all flesh through a flood. And after the rainbow, Noah was a man of the soil and planted a vineyard. Before the flood, he and his sons had been commanded by God to gather all types of food. So they did as God directed and loaded up the various kinds of food, and grapes were among the delicious fruits. As we know, when given time to dry in the sun, grapes can naturally ferment through the wild yeast that attaches to their skin. I imagine that Noah did not suspect that by crushing those grapes without washing them, he was inadvertently creating wine. After drinking this proto-wine, he became the first drunk in recorded history. Rosé after the rainbow. Noah had no idea about the effects of alcohol. He must have drunk a significant quantity of his wine and become inebriated. He then passed out naked on the bed in his tent. His second son, Ham, did not respect his father's privacy, nor show due honor to his father when he was in that vulnerable state. Ham not only observed his father Noah unclothed, he also told his brothers Shem and Japheth about it. Did he make fun of their father? Was he trying to get them involved in spying on their father's nakedness so he wouldn't be the only one who did the wrong thing? I can imagine perhaps he said something along the lines of, "Check it out, guys. Not only is Dad old, but he got himself drunk, and now he's naked and doesn't even know what's happening." Oh dear. But the brothers Shem and Japheth tried their best to minimize the situation. They sought an honorable way to address the problem so that no one else would see Noah in a state of undress and oblivion. They stood next to each other, put a garment over their shoulders, and walked into Noah's tent backwards. Averting their eyes, they placed the garment over their father so that he would be clothed again, and left him alone to recover. Once Noah came to and realized what had happened, he spoke some strong words about each of his sons. He cursed his disobedient son Ham and Ham's son Canaan. He blessed his responsible sons, Shem and Japheth. Noah's drunkenness and his son Ham's response caused serious trouble for their family, not only in the generation of his children, but also in the next generation of his grandchildren. It's a very sad turn of events. Another episode of disharmony in relationships. So far in Genesis, we have seen how sin and selfishness led to dishonesty and disharmony, blaming in the marital relationship of Adam and Eve, and dishonesty in their relationship with God. Then on the level of siblings, jealousy and anger led Cain to kill his brother Abel, and initially he didn't show remorse when confronted by God with his guilt. Here in the family of Noah, the rift had lasting effects across several generations. It's ironic. This family had been specifically chosen by God to be spared from the destruction of the flood, singled out as the last best hope for carrying humankind forward. Noah was described as someone who walked with God. And Noah and his wife and their 3 sons and their wives had all worked together, obeying God and building the ark. They had gotten through that whole adventure of the flood and even received God's blessing in the covenant and the beautiful rainbow, confirming it. But then, just a short time afterward, everything fell apart for them again. This incident with the fruits of the vine not only impacted Noah, but created strife and a rift throughout his whole family. What happened to Noah after the ark reminds me of marriages and families that have faced real difficulties, like getting through the tough times of isolation and fear and hardship during the pandemic. But then once they got their freedom again, after they made it through the crisis, they discovered they were actually sick and tired of each other. They ended up fighting so much that they split up and went their separate ways. An article in The Guardian from 2023 quotes a psychologist as saying, "The pandemic changed family dynamics. It changed dynamics in all relationships. It would be quite unrealistic that with the end of the pandemic that those issues would become automatically resolved." I guess you could say the same about the ark. Sadly, Noah and his family carried the dysfunctions of humanity with them throughout their confinement in the ark. And after they reached solid dry ground, they just spilled back into the open again. The thing is, each of us knows that it is difficult to live as a person of faith in community with other people. Every day and at all times throughout the day and evening, we have opportunities to respond to the circumstances of our life. Will we notice the blessings that God has provided for us? Will we appreciate God's kindness and the kindness of those around us and give thanks sincerely? Or will we take for granted our health and home as if we are always entitled to all the best of everything? When we feel disappointed about something or face delays or difficulties, will we make the problem worse by vocally complaining to those around us and taking everyone else's mood down into the dumps with us? Or will we instead make the effort to look diligently for a ray of hope and focus on what is going well and amplify that? When we speak with the people in our family, will we treat them with respect and honor them and their point of view, even if we disagree? Every day, we have choices to make about whether we will live up to God's good expectations of us to be a person of faith. Every day on this island is like living on a small ark. By gathering together with others and sharing in community faith and fellowship, we seek to navigate the rough waters of life and not getting stuck in all those old patterns and end up getting sick of one another in the process. Well, as I noted, this sad episode of drunkenness in the family of Noah affected them for generations. It's a cautionary tale for all of us. At its worst, overconsumption of alcohol damages couples and family relationships, harms vulnerable people, and causes rifts in friendships. Overindulgence also creates the kind of embarrassment that Noah suffered. I'm sure that we all have stories about someone making a fool of themselves at a party because they drank too much, wearing the proverbial or actual lampshade on their head. Right. Oh. What is the biblical stance on alcohol? Well, how much time do you have? It would take a long sermon to explain. In a nutshell, let me put it this way. You can easily make arguments for or against the consumption of alcohol by reading selected passages and ignoring others. The temperance movement in Europe and the United States in the 1920s was largely religiously motivated and sought to marshal biblical passages like Ephesians 5:8. Do not get drunk with wine, for that is debauchery, but be filled with the Spirit. And that was part of the motivation of their cause. But on the other hand, Jesus turned water into wine at that wedding in Cana as a sign of hospitality and compassion on the family hosting the wedding reception. And Jesus also served wine during the Last Supper. So it's complicated. A famous passage in 1 Timothy 5:23 states, "No longer drink only water, but take a little wine, for the sake of your stomach and your frequent ailments." This passage used to excuse the patent medicine composed essentially of high-proof alcohol that pious Christians kept in their medicine cabinets. More recently, some studies purported to show that drinking wine was good for your heart. Current research suggests that even moderate drinking contributes to heart disease and cancer. Writing in the January 14th, 2025 issue of the New York Times, Roni Karen Rabin summarized the current medical perspective on the dangers of drinking after analyzing the results of decades of studies. She wrote, among both men and women, drinking just one alcoholic beverage a day increases the risk of liver cirrhosis, esophageal cancer, oral cancer, and injuries of various kinds. She quotes a professor of epidemiology as saying, any suggestion that low or moderate levels of consumption of alcohol are generally harmless or beneficial, that data just don't bear out. So why did Paul advise Timothy to drink wine rather than water for the sake of his health? My guess is that it had more to do with the quality of the water back then than the health benefits of wine. In that era, there were no water treatment plants, and a variety of bacteria flourished in people's drinking water, making them sick. By drinking fermented beverages, you could effectively purify the water and avoid waterborne illnesses. So, given our modern water filtration systems, we may no longer need to follow Paul's advice to the ailing Timothy. Well, let me now close with my life application. As you recall, the early feedback from our visioning sessions included the idea that you would like to have direct life applications or calls to action from my sermons. So I'm setting aside time after every sermon to give you something practical to do. This week's Bible passage has an obvious concrete step for life application. Reflect on the effects of the consumption of alcohol in your life and in the lives of your friends and family. I would like you to track carefully this week the amount of alcohol you drink and ask yourself, is this level of consumption promoting my health and the growth of my character? I would also like you to think about how the consumption of alcohol is affecting your relationships with your family, friends, and neighbors. If you find harmful patterns, the good news is that we have resources to help you. As you know, we host Alcoholics Anonymous meetings every week on Tuesdays and Saturdays. And I can also connect you with Al-Anon if the overconsumption of alcohol is causing trouble for your family. So again, my charge to you is to write a daily log of the alcohol that you imbibe, and then at the end of the week, to ask yourself whether you believe this level of drinking is promoting your health and spiritual well-being.